Fox News alert. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley facing enormous pressure to resign over reports of his calls with his Chinese counterpart during the final weeks of the Trump administration. General Milley is accused of going behind the former president's back to warn China of a possible attack. Fox News is told the calls were not a secret and were conducted with the full knowledge of former Defense Secretary Mark Esper and then Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller. Emily, it is incredible to me if this quote is true, which, by the way, has not been denied by General Milley. If this quote is what he said to his Chinese counterpart, if we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise. He has not yet denied those words were said.
And that's exactly right. Excuse me. And so the Pentagon has said, they've come out and they've said, look, context matters. This is what the Pentagon has stated that context is. They say, as you read in the lead-in, the fact that this was with full knowledge of and actually at the direction of his superiors. They said, make sure the Chinese are calmed down. They said they had questions of stability as questions surrounding the election were occurring in America. They said, we don't want to, quote, stumble into conflict. Make sure that your counterparts are essentially assuaged of any concern they have. So his defense was, and this is again according to the Pentagon, I've had a relationship with my counterpart for 5 years. We spoke regularly. This was absolutely standard operating procedure, and I just reached out to let him know there's nothing to worry about. This is stable. As well, when he conducted the nuclear check, he said that was standard operating procedure too. It took 15 minutes. This happens all the time. Now, that being said, given he hasn't denied that specific statement that has been accused of frankly rising to a treasonous nature, the Wall Street Journal, among many, have said when you testify in front of Congress on September 28th, you better have answers. They specifically say as well, we'll pull it up for you, a comment that America's military brass rightly has deconfliction channels open with adversaries when their forces are in proximity. But promising a tip-off before the president ordered an attack would be an outrageous usurpation.
No doubt about it. I talked to a former very high-level intelligence official in the Trump era before coming to air. He emphasized that part about, look, it's par for the course to talk to adversaries. That's, to him, that was the lesser deal. He said to me, the missed ball, what no one is talking about, is his meeting to talk about nuclear attack. He basically said, if a nuclear attack is launched, remember, I'm part of the decision-making. This former high-level intel official said to me, he has no part, other than carrying out the president's order, he has no part in the decision-making of a potential nuclear launch. And for him to, he said, insert himself into the chain of command and then circumvent the chain of command is absolutely inexplicable. He said that is the bigger story. That's what's being missed. He said, quote, there is no explanation that can be offered if this is true. And I say if this is true because I don't ever trust Woodward.
Yeah, I know. I saw you mentioning that on Fox Primetime, and I think that's a good point, because if this is true, though, he should not only resign, he should be fired. This is something that I would like to hear President Biden speak on, because he actually broke the law. He worked outside of where his dictate. He doesn't have that sort of authority, as you know. But my other question and my other surprise here, actually not really surprised, the fact that this wasn't a private phone call, there were 15 people on this video, on 2 video conference calls. So, and Miller says that there is no evidence and that any accusation or speculation that President Trump had any intention of attacking China is untrue.
Yes.
Okay. So there is no evidence. The president was tough on China. That was what he was elected to do, but he had no intention on attacking China. So therefore, what was the point of this phone call? The only point of this phone call was obviously to undermine the president of the United States in his final days in office.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And what is confounding to me, Guy Benson, Ben Domenech tweeted that he was hearing that Milley himself was the leaker. That's what Ben Domenech heard. I've heard that now from 2 separate sources, one in the Department of Defense, one in the intel community, saying they think Milley himself leaked this story. How did he think this was going to turn out well?
If he's the leaker, and we don't know the answer to that question, we don't know a lot of things about this story. I think the most concerning allegation, at least, the most explosive one, is that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff allegedly told his Chinese counterpart that he would tip China off to any sort of impending or forthcoming American attack, although it appears that there was no attack planned whatsoever, not even close. So I would like to hear answers on this from General Milley. I know some people are leaping right to treason. I don't want to believe that about the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I think he deserves an opportunity to explain what happened. But we do need specific answers to specific questions from him. I'll just say this. I had Jennifer Griffin, our colleague, on the radio yesterday, and she is impeccably sourced within the Pentagon and at the highest reaches of the defense establishment. She said her sources are saying this story is blown out of proportion. The meeting was not secret. Some of the characterizations in this book from Bob Woodward will not stand up under scrutiny. I trust Jennifer Griffin that her sources are telling her that, but I think we need more than just anonymous say-so on all of this.
We need people like Secretary of Defense Miller, who came out, put his name on the record. He's not leaking to people, put his name on the record saying, hey, I didn't know about this China call, the one that occurred in January. It was secret to me. But Kennedy, I worked with General Milley, crossed paths with him in the hallway. We have some pictures I think will pop up. I was there when he was very complicit in walking to St. John's Church, happily, smilingly walked to St. John's Church with the president, only to then the next day come out and apologize for that. You know, if this is true, and again, I say if because I don't trust Woodward at all, but if this is true, this is the deep state. It's the Faucis and the Millies that smile at you in the hallways of the West Wing but throw you under the bus when the going gets tough and when a new administration's coming in.
Yeah, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs should not be a political actor. He should not be leaking information, and he shouldn't be trusted by the president. Because if he's going to sell out the former president because he was in a state of mental decline, why wouldn't he do the same thing to Joe Biden, who is clearly not in control of all of his marbles? So he's still the Joint Chiefs chair. He still has that job. So I think Biden, of everyone here they're all untrustworthy. I don't trust Kirby. I can't believe that Kirby defended him like he did. I don't trust Lloyd Austin. This is why the DOD should be controlled by civilians. And I certainly think that General Milley has a lot to answer for, not only this, but for droning innocent civilians in Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, that intel source I mentioned, what he said to me is, I know exactly why the Biden administration is defending him. They can't throw him on the bus because he will throw them under the bus on Afghanistan and that humiliating withdrawal. So they all have to be on the same team on this one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.